there's a lot of criminal behavior in society. There's criminal judgments. People falsify information. They falsify sciences. They think that a structural difference in your body means that you automatically have a genetic disorder. And you can research dentistry, and many times dentists will tell you just because you have crooked teeth or a crooked bone structure does not mean you absolutely have a genetic disorder. Okay, you could have different shaped skull. It may be a result of your genes, but it's not a defect. However, maybe it is sometimes. So it depends. There are structural differences in the human body that are not truly, absolutely a defect. They may be a result of genetics, but not absolutely a defect. So you need to know if it's actually a defect or not, or if it's just structural differences. There are more difficult to deal with mutations. Okay, you need to know the difference in mutations and what they mean. Like, if the mother of a birthing child gets some type of infection, or the child gets an infection, or something happens to the baby throughout its life, it gets a virus, or it gets sick, or it gets poisoned, or toxins, or anything could happen. Something could cause a mutation later in life as well. So, like, at any stage of your life, you're susceptible to cause damage to your cellular tissues. And you got to distinguish between whether your genetics makes you dysfunctional, or whether there is a dysfunction, or whether the deformity was acquired after birth, or whether it's not a deformity that's genetic, it's an acquired illness that's subgenetic. Subgenetics is everything that isn't genetic, that can lead to genetics. But, yes and no. So, like, you need to learn that the world misjudges everything. And even doctors think that they're really smart and they know everything about everyone, but that's not absolutely the truth. Okay, doctors make mistakes too. And we've seen this all along. I mean, the most brightest people in the world fail at understanding a condition. Okay, we all do. My IQ is rated between 114 and 120. I took multiple tests in the same area of time, and that's my given IQ. I took a long test that rated me in 2007 as having a 113, and this is 2022. They say you gain so many points, like 3 points every 3 years or something like that. 9 points over 9 years. So, like, I'm probably right now at the IQ range of about 120. And I think your IQ tests are actually not as accurate as you might think they are either. Because when you start scaling intelligence, actually some things of the past were really stupid, and they're incorporating things in intelligence levels that are really stupid. So, like, there are certain words that we probably don't use anymore because they've been phased out. They've been redefined even. So, like, there's scaling intelligence changes actually. So, like, your intelligence can get better. You can learn. Actually, you can learn probably faster than what they say you do. So don't fret it if your IQ is 100. By the time you turn, if your IQ is 100 when you're 18, by the time you turn 40 or 50, you're going to probably have the what we call the minimum genius level IQ. And that's what the whole point of learning from more intelligent people is that you will increase your IQ by learning concepts from other people. You do have to think a lot. You do have to think. You have to learn. But in general, diagnosing, administering, dealing with any kind of condition, understanding conditioning. You need to know that the world and the universe all started with geometry, made of particles that are geometrical. And you need to know the law of geometry is that nothing can exist unless it has volume. And space-time, like Einstein thought, how can space be nothing and have anything to do with time at all in a geometrical way of any kind if space is nothing? How can it affect the particles that are made of volume in any way if it has nothing in it? So the question is are these measurements that we know accurate? Are the scientists really knowledgeable about physical life, or are they making mathematical errors? Commonly, even the best genius mathematicians made errors, and we discovered this even with Albert Einstein. We're discovering this now with Albert Einstein. We're discovering this now with Nikola Tesla. I mean, they all made false statements that were intelligent, but they weren't true. So you got to understand that geometry is the core value of everything. Geometry and algebra pretty well could be considered the two ultimate maths. And they are the reason for all eternity. It can never be any different. Doesn't matter where you're at. Geometry and algebra is pretty much the condition. It's the universal language, geometry and algebra. Okay? So, like, you need to understand that those are systematic and they are particulate. And they can vary over the universe, and we have no idea. They may be infinitely divisible. And that means that there are universes inside of particles. And that's strange. How could that be possible? You wouldn't imagine that that would ever be possible. How could something be infinitely divisible? Nobody knows. Why would it be? Maybe it's only partially divisible. Maybe there are only so many universes and they only occur every so often. Or maybe there is no divisibility in the particles at all. Maybe the particles are themselves a single unit of energy that cannot be divided. We don't absolutely know this. I don't want to make a false statement. But the question is how does the universe itself look if the way that it is, how is it contained in nothingness? How, according to the science, we're moving through nothingness. We started with a Big Bang Theory, the explosion, and it was created from the motion of geometry. And then particles were created, and they reacted, and then so forth. There were what we call different segments of time, And there were also different phases to this existence. So those phases and those segments of time, different things occurred. And there, at some point, may be like the big crunch. So there's all different reasons for conditioning and combinations to the lock. The lock is multi-combinational, and it has multiple combinations, multiple locks, and multiple keys. And Fermi Labs is one of the new inventions that will help us discover more about where we need to go in the future. We may develop superparticles that produce energy the entire existence of Earth. And that's amazing, okay? That a permanently radiating particle that generates enough heat, nuclear heat, to sustain a hot nuclear reaction constantly, endlessly. It doesn't undergo fission, and it may undergo fusion, but only depending upon the system or the particle or how it reacts. There's a lot to conditioning. How do we govern these particles when we want to use them the way that we want to use them? How do we govern geometry? How do we govern anything? Study geometry very well. Study algebra and calculus as well. And your trigonometry, you need that too. Because once you start designing mathematically, you become as intelligent as Einstein. Einstein wasn't very physical. He wasn't much of a physicist. Einstein was somewhat blind. He couldn't conceptually grasp certain aspects of nature. It's not that he didn't understand nature. It's that he didn't understand the principles of nature. He was genius, but it was mostly in math. He couldn't see that a whole meant nothing. And what if a whole means nothing? What do you do with nothing? You don't do shit with nothing. So that's the point, is that nothing is useless. It's a provider of nothing. And Einstein conducted a lot of his theory and his richness off of space-time. What kind of condition is nothingness to a time? Time and nothingness don't exist together. Nothingness is void. So Einstein happens to be very wrong, and he's also wrong about time travel. He may very well be wrong and led the whole planet Earth to being wrong about the waving of light. And he may be wrong about several conditions. He's probably not as smart as everyone makes him out to be. He was smart. Yes. He was a valuable person. But people are not smart enough to see through what he did. Unless you understand what I'm telling you. You have to show the geometry in the form of evidence that his statements are true. And you cannot do this with missing information. The condition has to be met. And it has to be solid geometry. You have to see the geometry in action. There has to be no elusive conditioning or information or data. It's not true what Einstein said. Time travel, that's another thing he was talking about. Traveling back into the past into parallel universes and stuff. That's not true. You can never travel back to the past. If you do, it will be upon the recreation of the universe after you died, and that time permitted the exact events of a previous life to occur. You cannot travel back in the past. But the definition of time is the motion of objects. So if no objects are in motion, then time ceases to move. Time stands still. You need to know this. Einstein was a fool. Time is present, past, and future, where the only thing that can change it is the motion of objects. So know this. This is a video about conditioning. Learning conditions and measurements. Understanding the truth about conditions and measurements. And you need to know this information. It's all about the measurement of mathematics. So that made Einstein smart. But some things are not easily or ever even possible to measure about something that can't be gathered into a geometrical field. So if it can't be harnessed or grasped, or it takes a really long time to make that measurement, it is costly. It's only an assumption. So therefore, that's what it's all about, is measurement of geometry and algebra. And that's existence. So work with that. But we may find a lot of solutions, but will we solve this entire puzzle called life on Earth? We may. It's questionable. But it is going to be one great feature. It is going to be the greatest feature that you could achieve as a being of life. It doesn't get any better than that. I mean, but besides traveling the universe and surviving, especially well,